Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to go over how to create the CSS file. So I have two HTML files, the home page and the resume final. And the way you solve them ultimately is because of the CSS file that I already created, but I'm going to go over how to create it. So you need a new text file, and we're going to save as, and we're going to call it style.css, and save. There is another one, but it's okay to replace it, I know for now. And so we begin styling. Now, hopefully you already thought a little bit about it. And I did think about it, and I have some already styling that is already implemented here. So one is regarding the body. So the body, we identify the selector tag that we're going to modify, and the body is it's quite a lot of the content, most of the content, although some other configurations superseded or override. And here I have some properties. So margin 0, that means that there will be no margin from the main one. I think this is from the left, and we can take a look. Margin top 50 pixels, font family, it's going to be sans serif, font size for the body 18 pixels. Now, if I use this now, actually probably going to mess up a lot of the content, but let's take a look at it. Why not? So I'm going to save this file. Now, the other files, I refer to the style CSS here. So to stylize and render all this information, it's going to be referring to the style sheet. Now, I actually have much more content that was used to style the page the way you last saw it. But now if I do a real, because now it's going to refer to this one, if I refresh, it's kind of not going to look the same. So it's kind of a little bit, not too bad actually, but I'm not styling the header. I'm not styling the divisions, the sections rather. You can see the content. The bullet points are actually kind of working here, so that's nice. And you can kind of see that if we change, well, it's not going to make a difference because this margin I put here for the header. So let's go back. Let's take a look at the resume. Resume, click on the resume. Still get the body color and some of those other measures, because if you remember in the resume, we put it in inline. And I did add some padding here. See the padding on top, kind of moved it farther to the bottom. But so just some basic body properties here. Now, one of the main properties though that I established here, and you can see a lot of what can go on. Once again, you don't have to copy exactly what's going on here, but it's really interesting. So this is the whole styling for the header. And I'll explain how this works. So I'm going to save, and I'm already going to examine what it looks like. So once I reload the page, it's not totally fixed, and I know why, because, and I'll show you, but you see, so I did create the navigation header on the top, but the list of items are like kind of like weirdly vertical here. So you go to about me on the main page, the same thing. So I did create the navigation header on the top, but somehow I have this content here. So what the header does is I'm using this display property and flex, which refers to as flexible, and that has to do with how it's going to respond to other content around it. Now it's kind of unclear to see how it works until you actually see how it works. And one of the ways to do it is to kind of just try. So for example, if we take this out, Control Save and reload it, the picture that goes in there doesn't fit to the header. So same thing here, the picture that's supposed to stay there doesn't stay there. So this helps address the other header, some of the header content. Now, as I will show you, there is other kinds of header CSS that can be used. So the thing is, a header tag and styling refers to the header itself. And sometimes if we're referring to the items inside the header, it may be a little bit different. So I actually had to add this this block here, the style block, by identify header and elements. This is all the elements. And I had to use the display property and the inline value, and that ensures header items are inside the header. So if I save this, this is how I got to have those items all be inside here. So now this is this picture went back here because of the display. Now it's flexible of the header. And because I also added this here, the display inline. If I take away the display inline, it will save, refresh, it does that. So that's what this means, is that the display of the elements of the header are going to be inside the header. And this actually helps ensure other header items occupy a whole extent of the header. Now this one made sure that it all kind of matches together. And just to finish some of these points here on the main header area, the position is fixed, so the header is just kind of going to stay there, the navigation header. Let's reload it to see it, kind of just move it back. So it just stays there. So if we go back to home, it kind of stays there. About me, contact me. The header stays there. Top, left, right, these are 0 because I want it to always be no spacing, no borders on the top, on the left, and all the way on the right. So you get rid of any space. The space is 0. Height 50 points. This extent of bar from top to bottom, the greater the bigger. So if I increase here, this bar is going to be bigger. The line height, this is a little bit maybe ambiguous, but it's height of the inline text items. So this is the way I was able to actually put these content in here. Now, if I change this, let's just change it. You will see that it will move it all the way on the bottom. So this text is 100 points from the top. So that's too much. I want 50 points to center with the bar. Now I also have display and inline here for the header elements and height. This has to do, this applies actually to the pick to make sure I have the pick correct. If I didn't have this height here, oops, I didn't have this height here for the header elements. Oops, let's see, save and contact me, home. So maybe you can go without it. I thought that one had effect here to ensure the pick was stayed in place, but maybe it's not necessary. So some things here may be redundant or unnecessary. But these look like this is what I needed to make the navigation header stay the way it is here. Some other things. So I wanted to example separate these a little bit. See how they're so close together, home, about. So I actually did a specific block here for the list item. Remember, this is a list. So if we go to resume, this is a list item. So the styling is going to apply to all the lists in the header, only the list in the header, and just a margin left, which creates spaces out every item. So if we add this here, and now we refresh, and notice how too this stays consistent across the page, which is what we want. So that's why the styling is different, is done on a different file. External styling sort of applies to the things that are shared across the pages. Now, I also wanted to add a section, some section information. So this is how the sections are going to look like, particularly in the home page, because that's where the sections apply. And height, I'm using this VH unit. There are different units you can use, and this one refers to the percentage of the height of the viewport. So this is how I actually get it to fill the screen. And so when each section comes up, I have one section, second section, third section, it will fill the screen. So it almost looks like it's separate, its own separate page. Now the display, once again, is flexible, and this flex display has to do with a kind of self-adjustment based on other properties that are being given for a particular item. And sometimes you just kind of have to play around with it to see what works. You know, always use the CSS reference from W3 Schools, and you can see the properties and the values. That's kind of the way you learn about this. So if I save this and we go back and reload the main page, you can see I start getting that structure that I had before. And you can see how if I go to contact me, it fills the screen perfectly. About me, it fills the screen. Home, about me. And then the other properties here, align items, justify content, text align. These are all different kinds of alignments. And this one, center items within the content of section. So the align items, center all the items, the justify content. So it moves content to the left, well, to the center. It used to be to the left, but to the center to the extent possible. Text align, center aligns text to the center as well. Now, this was a little bit also, the way I discovered this was just by trying it out, because if I move some of them, so for example, if you move align items, for example, to the left, and you reload, actually what that does is it moves the content kind of upward to the top of the page. Now, I'm not really sure why it does that, but when I was able to, and if I don't, and let's see what if you don't have it at all. If you don't have it at all, it just stays on the top there. So because this was kind of, I wanted to kind of give it a break and center it in the screen, I found this property, the align items, and with the center value. And then the justify content also in the center, because if I don't justify content in the center, if I leave it to the left, for example, to the right, it goes all the way to the left over here, which I didn't want either. Of course, maybe you do want it. So it depends on what you want to do with your page. And so on. And the text alignment also centered, and I'm mostly going to apply to these things here, because you can see they're centered, but you can also center some of the content, but then align the text to the left. Maybe this could be interesting here too. Text aligned to the left. Let's see. I remember trying it and it wasn't really that pretty. Okay, so this goes to the left. This content also goes to the left to some extent, but then stays in the center. So it's a little bit kind of tricky sometimes, but some content is centered, but it's also adjusted to the left. So the best way I found was to center everything, and that worked pretty well for me. Everything is centered here. Now there was that still bullet point that I didn't address before, but we can look into it and how to address. Now I also played around with some other styling, especially for the section headings, and I was just kind of playing around with the size of the font, and you can see here how we can identify specific tags from specific classes, and also specific tags from specific other tags. So this applies to heading 2 under section 2, heading 3 under section 3, and so on, heading 1 under the home section. And this has to do with amount of times to make it bigger from the body or the main font size. EM is kind of multiplied by the font size, so 2.5 times the font size, 2.5 times the font size, 1.5 times the font size. You can kind of regulate the heading size as well. And then if you remember, I had some images from my different sections. And the images, I got it and I did it in this way here. So I have these are all rules, right? The rule set. And this home here is going to refer to the home elements in the section of the home page. So there's a section ID home, and if you want to create styles just for that, you need the hashtag home, open up curly brackets, and then add your content. Now, the only thing that I have here for that home in particular, and that's different from the about and the contact, is a background image. And I'm using the background image as the property, and then I have also a linear gradient function. This kind of applying a function to create a nice effect on the image so it's easy to see, and it's not too strong on the Y, and you see kind of what it looks like. And the way to apply kind of looks weird, but the way the linear gradient works, and you can actually examine this on the W3 Schools tutorials as well, and we have two images. One, the way the gradient begins and the way the gradient ends. Now, both of mine is white because that gives it a nice tone that I like. And then including the alpha, which refers to transparency at 0.75. And then also I have the image itself here. Now I'm using an image from an URL on the web. Notice how it's going to get some picture under Flickr. Now, this is really not advisable for your own purposes for a number of reasons. One is that we don't know how long this file is going to stay here at its exact address, okay? And then the second one is that we don't know if we have permission to use this file in the fashion that we may be using it. I use it here to show to you how you can actually refer to an image on another site, if possible, but you can also refer to the image in your own, I'm sorry, it keeps happening, on your own folder as you use the same other images. However, the linear gradient here is applying to this whole thing. So if you want the linear gradient to apply to the image, you have to put it in the same line the way I did it here. So this whole thing is the value for that background image. There's linear gradient function. There's a few parentheses here because there's two RGBA values, as I said, one that begins and then the one that it ends. In my case, is the same, but you need this information here for the linear gradient to work. And I just did the same thing for the three different sections. Now this, I think two of the first ones are the same picture and the third one is a different picture, but let me show you now. Save and what it looks like. So reload, it gets those pictures. Now, the pictures are not actually like that, the original pictures. They look this way because of the linear gradient that I applied. If I didn't apply the linear gradient, it would look much darker. So for example, if I had no transparency here, let's see what it looks like with no transparency. Now the linear gradient would still be applied. So I just modified the first section. So you can see it's kind of very much darker. So this is a nice image, but it's very dark. So it's kind of makes the text harder to read. So the linear gradient gives it a nice effect, but also the transparency helps. So let me show you with transparency on one side only. Save. So the transparency, so as I said, is the value that it goes from and the value that it goes to. So at the beginning, it's got 0 transparency, but at the end, it has lots of transparency. So you can see it's dark on top, the beginning is 0 transparency, at the end, high transparency. So if you can kind of get this effect too, this is kind of nice for this one. I think it fits. Maybe I'll just keep it like that. And the same thing here, you can kind of play around with these. If it's maybe too much or too high, you can change the gradient. So let's do the opposite, this one. Let's do from very transparent to less transparent. Inverted from the previous. Refresh. And you can see, so dark on top, light on the bottom, light on the bottom, gets dark on top. Could be cool, but maybe gets in the way of reading. So you got to be careful with that. And Contact Me is the same thing, but it goes to a different picture. Now, lastly, I just really have the footer. And the footer just really put a text align on the center and put a padding to separate between the two sections. And I'm saving, and then now reload, and then it has that separate padding, as you can see. Well, especially here because this is in outside of the section. So the section, the foot is its own section. The section in the home page ended here. So we do have that, there's a section border that we established somewhere. Border, this is where that border comes from, section border, 1 point solid black. But I don't think it applies in the resume. On the resume, you still have that weird red there. Let's see if we reloaded, did we leave that there? Yes. Let's remove that there. Let's remove the color. Now, if we leave the style background color here, it remains. But if we wanted the same, we can put it in the style. And maybe let me try something here. Let's put background color. There is a color, I remember, EEE, I use it elsewhere. I think I use that maybe for the, do I use that either for this background or for the navigation bar on top? Let's see what it looks like. And this is the hexadecimal notation. There's different ways to refer to color. Once again, you need a hexadecimal RGB color chart on the web. You can find there are many available to show what they translate these. Now let's say save. And then, okay, kind of similar. Maybe this 50 padding is too much. And then maybe we can also put a margin. Margin, I think the default margin is to the left. So if we put 0, let's see if that works. I'm not really sure if it will, but save, reload. Yeah, see, everyone's unable to get that margin on the left to 0. Yeah, it's something else applying. I would have to look into it to get rid of that here. It's probably being override by the whole body. So I can't really, this is why this using the sections is nice, because you create the separate sections and they're kind of independent from each other. You can see here, I don't have to worry about that space here. So that's all I have for this one. And I hope this was useful to you.